Hello, students and science teachers. This is Mr. Cribbs. I wanted to take just a few minutes to tell everybody about our upcoming science fair and give you some tips and things to look for. First off, our science fair this year is going to be in a few months. It's going to be on Wednesday, April 15th, 2020. That's tax day for you teachers. If you want to look at a calendar, that is actually going to be the Wednesday we return from spring break. So you have the entire 9 days for spring break, and it's the Wednesday when we come back. Okay, now I'm not going to go over every single page of the science fair packet, but I am going to hit some of the high points that I think are important for students to look at and pay attention to. Teachers, this is for you as well. Teachers, if you need science fair packets for students, please let me know a number. I would discourage you from saying, give me 100. Find out which of your students are interested in participating in science fair, get that number, and I'll be happy to get some to you. Okay, let's begin. Yes, we have science fair rules. People typically don't read these, but there are rules. One big one that I've had to highlight over the past couple years is number 9. Anything involving animals, drugs, explosives, firearms are not permitted. Every year I have somebody who wants to bring tadpoles or do something with mice or crickets. That is not allowed. We can't have living animals. There is a reason for that. If you have any questions about why, get with me and I'll tell you. There is some introductory information in this packet that kind of gives you the difference between a model and an experiment. Every year, students, I have people try to turn in a science demonstration or a display. A science demonstration is not a science experiment. A science experiment begins with a question, and you design an experiment to answer that question. A model or display is just that. It's just displaying an idea. Kind of like the volcano. You make a volcano that explodes. That's a model. But an experiment actually tests a question. So make sure that what you submit is an experiment and not a model. It briefly goes over the steps of the scientific method. I'm not going to do that. It's great. It gives you a step-by-step, do this, then this, then this, then this, in order to complete a science fair project. I'm not going to read those. You can. This is a great place to put your ideas down in the beginning stages of the science fair. You can go through the summary worksheet, kind of give you an idea of what materials you're going to need, what steps you're going to need to take. Resources, when you do your resources or references for your science project, you have to have at least 3. I would encourage you to not use Wikipedia. Try to use some actual resources, maybe some articles from a journal or something from that's more information-based, not like Science Buddies or Wikipedia or something like that. But you have to have at least 3 of those. Also, those resources or references, you're going to have those listed on your tri-board. We'll talk about that in a moment. Let's see. I like this part. If you're going to use information from a resource, you got to put it in your own words, or it gives you a space to do that. This is a great checklist. Students, you can use this to make sure you have everything you need. One big one is this logbook we're going to talk about in a minute. That is, students oftentimes are missing this logbook, but we'll talk about that in a moment. Okay, so this sheet, the student checklist, this is a great way for you to keep yourself organized and make sure you have everything you need to complete the science fair project. Teachers, I would ask that before you have students submit a science fair project to be judged by our judges, I need you to please go through this checklist and make sure all these things are in place. If a student is missing one of these things, they cannot have their science fair project judged. Let me say that again. Look at this checklist. They have to have all these portions completed in order to set up their project for judging on April 15th. I've had an issue in the past where students aren't completely finished, and we only want finished projects being submitted for judging. You might want to ask students to turn that in a week early or start looking at that throughout the process. And say a student's missing a component or two, you have a few days where you could say, or spring break, where you can say, hey, you need to make sure you have a conclusion. I don't see any data graphs or charts. Please be sure to add those by the due date so you can submit yours. Students, this is also a good idea. When you're being judged for your science fair project, there are going to be judges from outside the school here. These are good things to be prepared for because you're going to be standing with your project when it gets judged, and you need to be able to answer these questions. You need to be able to state your problem hypothesis, explain your procedure, work on your posture and eye contact, those sorts of things. So this is a good preparatory checklist for the day of judging. So again, teachers, this is a good checklist to make sure students can submit their project for judging. Students, this is a great checklist for preparing for the day of judging. This is a example poster board. You can get really creative on the poster board. Notice that number 7, references. You have to have those references listed even though they're not in this picture. But you can lay it out however you like. But you need to have each of these components in it. Here's some tips on giving your oral presentation. And finally, this is the rubric that judges will use when they judge the science fair on April 15th. As you can see, there are 10 categories for a maximum of 4 points in each category. The highest you can get is 40. Students, listen carefully. Every single year, I have students do a great project, but they are missing this portion right here, the logbook. The logbook is what you are going to write down your observations and data in as you are conducting your as you are conducting your experiment. For example, if you have an experiment that lasted 5 days, you need to have each day, you need to write the date and write down what you were observing happening. If it happens over an hour, maybe you have a logbook that, measures what you observe at 5 minutes, at 15 minutes, at 25 minutes. Anyway, you have to have a logbook. Every year I have students missing this, and it is a huge loss on their project. Make sure you have that. Also, one more, it's not on here, but one more piece of advice, students and teachers, you want to hear this too. If you are doing a science experiment, remember, we're talking about the difference between an experiment and a model. An experiment, you're trying to set up an investigation to answer a question. Do your experiment more than one time. We call these trials. If you want to prove something and you do once and you get some results, do that experiment again and see if you get the same results. Maybe do it a third time. It's going to really help your project if you can show the judge that you tried the experiment multiple times to see if you got the same result. That's huge. All of our winners in the past 3 years have done that. I would say most middle school science projects, they only do one and that's it. To do it more than once. Let me skip down. That's the rubric. But again, you're going to have at least 2 judges, if not 3, come through and grade your oral presentation of your project. They're going to be looking at your tri-board too. I believe that's it. This is really for your teachers. That's it for the science fair packet. Remember, teachers, give me a number of how many you need. You might give the students this packet and just have them look over it while I'm talking about it. You play this video. And if you have any further questions, just let me know. Thanks a lot.